Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Hello, everybody. We are excited today to bring you to the Wild, Wild West. We are going to talk about Westerns today and how to write Westerns with Doug Osgood. So, Nicki, can you tell us more about Doug?
I'd be honored to. So Osgood grew up in the West, not far from Buffalo, the Buffalo in Western New York. He moved to St. Louis in 1993, where he still lives with his wife, who is also the love of his life, and his adult son. His love of Western storytelling comes naturally to Osgood from his paternal grandfather regaling parishioners with stories which may have been mildly exaggerated, to his maternal grandfather exchanging fish stories with friends over a game of draughts, to ponding over Gunsmoke episodes with his father. He was raised to spin yarns and tell tall tales. Osgood's first novel is due for release by Roan and Weatherford in the fall of 2025 under his pseudonym D.N. Sample. He is currently working on the sequel, due to be completed sometime this year. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Doug and I are part of a writing group here in the St. Charles, Missouri area. So I know his story, but I would love if you could share your writing journey with the rest of our community.
Sure. I grew up like a lot of boys who were readers and athletes. I was reading Edgar Rice Burroughs and Alfred Hitchcock and all of that stuff and loved it. And really, I tried to write stories as a teenager, and I'd get 10 or 15 pages into them, and that would be the end of it. Then later on, I finally, 2014, I took a novel writing class at an adult education class over at St. Charles Community College. And it was 6 weeks, as I recall, and I started my first novel. And the scene that I worked on then is a part of Cold Powder Vengeance. I sold the book to a publisher in 2016, but she went under and took a couple of years to get my rights back from her. And then Rowan Weatherford was interested and sold it to them. And in the meantime, I've participated in writing groups and critique groups and been to conferences and really worked on my craft. I'm a way better writer now than I was 12 years ago.
Awesome. And I love what you just said, because we did not plug Doug to say any of those words, but you said all the things that we encourage people to do. Take classes, go to conferences, join writing groups, have critique partners. It pays off. So
Yeah.
we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Congratulations, Doug. That's
Thank
exciting.
you.
Now, you write specifically Western, right? That's your favorite. What drew you to Western genre?
As a young child, I didn't have a lot in common with my dad. My dad was a blue-collar guy. He liked getting his hands dirty. I still don't like getting my hands dirty. The one thing we bonded over was every Saturday night, we sat together and watched Gunsmoke. And that was a ritual that we carried on until it went off the air in 75, I think is the year it went off. So that started the journey. My grandfather, my mom's dad, lived 3-4 doors down the street, and he was a big Zane Grey fan. He had a collection of Zane Greys, which I now own.
That's great.
And that's what the only thing he read was Zane Grey. It was always a Zane Grey. In college, I was introduced to Louis L'Amour, and I fell in love with his writing style and his stories. And since then, of course, there's been a lot of great Westerns on TV, in the movies, and I just love the genre in general, the action, the adventure, the ability to transport yourself to another time. So that's probably my story.
It's
I
great.
love
So
Westerns.
all great reasons to love a Western.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. My mom loves Louis L'Amour, and I think she has every book he's ever written.
Me too.
And, you know, she just rereads them. And so I'm a huge fan of Westerns. My uncle, every time the TV is on, there will be a Western playing. And so I was steeped in that from the time I was very young. One thing I love about Louis L'Amour is that you go to the places that he writes about and you are there. Like, it is accurate. How do
Mhm.
you, as a writer, balance the historical accuracy with your storytelling?
So I really work hard to accurately portray the background stuff that's going on. Historically, the sequel to my first novel is centered around some stuff that's happening, fictitiously happening, just prior to Battle of the Little Bighorn. And it plays an important part in the process. But I try to get all those details right. I don't worry about the details within my fictionalized village or whatever, other than like inventions. I don't want to miss some of those kinds of details. And some of them would surprise readers. When you think about it, if you ask the average person in the street when electric lights went up in, say, Deadwood, they would probably say something after 1900. But the reality is it was 1883. 1881 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, they had electric lights.
Wow.
Telephone exchange right around the same time. Those are details that make it interesting and add some reality to what's going on. And of course, catch readers going back and saying, wait a minute, that's not right. And
They all get us, don't they?
yes, but I try to do that, keep all of those things accurate, the history, the current events, all that stuff. I mean, that's the important part of it. And then the details and weapons. Men will call you out if you have a wrong, an incorrect detail about the weapons that they used.
Yeah. So I'm not a Western writer or reader, but for people, I'm curious as far as what themes do you think are essential in a great Western?
Oh boy.
I'd love to hear about tropes too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, there's a ton of tropes for Westerns. There's one website that lists 100 Western tropes. There's a ton of them. But the reality is, to me, the Western encompasses so many other possible genres. So you can have Western thrillers and Western romances and Western mysteries and Western science fiction or fantasy. And so all of that stuff is out there. But a lot of the stuff that we think about in terms of tropes for Westerns, you got the lone hero, the lone wolf. He's going to save the day, but boy, don't talk to him because he's surly, mean, and has no way of understanding women or relationships or even other people of any kind. And then, of course, there's the old West towns and the dirt street down the middle of Main Street and the shootouts on Main Street, which rarely ever actually happened.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just
one of the most
Hollywood thing.
It really is. It really is. There were some. James
OK
Butler.
Corral and Tombstone.
Yeah, that would be one. The OK Corral and Tombstone. The very first shooting that James Butler, his very first shooting was very much like that on Main Street. But after that, he was shot. When he was killed, he was shot in the back of the head in a saloon in Deadwood. And back shooting was a very normal thing in the West, but those street fights were much rarer than the TV shows and the movies would have us believe.
It is much easier just to shoot someone in the back.
Much easier, much safer too, really. Especially
and tons of integrity there, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
not shooting in generals. Anyways, well,
Wyatt Earp, for instance, he never shot anybody. I don't know that he ever shot anybody in the back. But speaking of the OK Corral, when he was in Dodge City, he was famous for pistol whipping bad guys,
Oh,
drunk, the unruly, the uncooperative. He would just pistol whip them. He didn't shoot them, just hit him over the head with his pistol. And pistols are iron and hurt. And
Yeah.
in many cases, causes a lot of damage and knocks people out. So, anyways, tropes.
Do you have a
I guess
favorite?
back to tropes.
yeah. Do you have a favorite trope?
I know that I do. I have a favorite one. I use a lot of them. I think probably one that I do is the railroad and that evil or conniving or railroad executive that was just worried about getting rich. And if I had to say one, that would be it.
Interesting. And did you want to talk about themes at all? Like derailed us.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I think themes for a really good Western, when you think about, what maybe one of the classic Westerns is Lonesome Dove. And there you've got this aging, retired lawman who wants to build the West and get rich by driving cattle herds from Texas to Montana. Very common. It's the development of the West, which is a common theme, I think, in a good Western. And everybody plays on that differently. Sometimes it's treated as a bad thing. Sometimes it's treated as a good thing. Another theme that I think you see in really good Westerns is a romance of some sort. Women were in short supply in reality in the West.
I don't know. That sounds so funny.
Yeah.
They
But when you
were.
think about it, it's true, right?
Slim pickings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mail order brides.
yes,
That's true.
exactly. Mail order brides it was a real thing. But every Western, if you think about the Westerns of our youth, the movies, the good Westerns we've read, there's a romance involved. Might be subtle, might be a little bit behind the scenes. Louis L'Amour, Hondo, which is one of the first ones I read, there's a romance involved. Now, it's got all these other things too, but the romance is there. And so I think a good Western has some kind of romance, whether it's unrequited love. I think when you look at Lonesome Dove, you've got a prostitute that there's one cowboy in the group that really is just pining over her. And then you've got the sidekick of the retired ranger, this other retired ranger who actually dates her, if you will, but she really isn't interested in either of them. She's just interested in the one with the most money. And eventually she ends up leaving. But it's unrequited love, I think. So I think that's an important theme in Westerns. And I think the other theme that I think is important in a good Western is that image of moral ambiguity, moral choices, moral decisions that have to be made. And sometimes we talk about as writers, the best, worst choice. But you have to make some moral decisions that you just can't necessarily make the moral choice. So you have to settle for something in between. And how do you make that decision? And how do you overcome some of that, the guilt that comes with that? So just my thoughts.
I think that moral ambiguity is what really keeps us coming back and wanting to see where your main character, what choice are they going to make? Those hard decisions. So when you put that in, that keeps me reading for sure. So Doug, you talked a little bit about the historical aspects of it. It sounds like you do quite a bit of research ahead of time. So what does your research process look like?
It varies. I mean, there's a lot of different types of research. So the bookcase back here is all of my Western research, and I have books on Blacks in the West. I have books on Native Americans, tribes. I have books on weapons. I have books on individuals' biographies, whatnot. I have general histories, all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, there's the library and the internet. And it just depends. I'm always researching, if you will. So I almost always have a book going. that some kind of history may not always be Western history, but almost always I've got a history book going, and I've got several good Western histories that I've been working through. And so that's just my general research. And then when I start writing, I'm looking for specific details, current event. I have a subscription to newspapers.com so I can try and look at the current events around the time period that I'm writing. What's happening in the world, what's happening in the territory, what's happening in the country, whatever the case may be. In some cases, I'm looking at all of that. Then I'm looking at more specific things. What type of weapons are being carried? What type of businesses would be available in a town like where the setting is? There are a lot of towns that didn't have doctors, towns that didn't have blacksmiths. So I'm looking at those kinds of things, and a lot of generalities, I'll put it that way, as well as specifics. But then when it gets down to town itself, I'm just looking at, or the setting, maybe not the town, but the setting. If it's a setting, I want specifics. I want to know exactly. Louis L'Amour, we talked about him earlier. He is famous for having visited all of the sites that he wrote about and camped there and knew the setting very well. And they became a character for him. I'm probably not that good, although I've visited many of the settings, but not to the extent that I would love to. So in my case, it's just more general. I have a good understanding of what it's like. And then, of course, Google Earth is my best friend. So
Google Earth is our friend, isn't it?
yeah.
That's great. It's great to get grounded not only in the location, but by doing that research. If they didn't have a doctor, that's a potential conflict maybe
Absolutely.
for you. Or if they didn't have a blacksmith, right? And so it's a double doozy. Not only you're getting potential plot points too. So that's really fascinating.
One more question on your research. It's just my curiosity, because I always go back and forth on this. If I'm writing about something, do you prefer to have an actual town, or do you prefer to have a made up town that's similar to something in that area? Because there's pros and cons to both. So which do you like to work with?
I have done both. Right now in the series Cold Powder Vengeance, there's the town that he's been homesteading in, and that's a fictional town that's based on just a normal blueprint of what a town would look like.
Right.
But then he ends up in Deadwood, which we have a lot of historical records about Deadwood from its very beginning, from its very roots, and which is when he shows up there is in the early days. So then I'm a little more specific. And then in the next book in the series, he'll be based out of Yankton, which was the territorial capital for several years. And there I've got a few details. I know what the governor's mansion looked like. It was not a mansion, by the way, but he called it that. And then the rest of it I just make up as I go, and I'm comfortable with that. If I want a specific detail, one of my works in progress that I've been working on for, 6 years, I guess, when I have a few minutes, I work on it. I was able to get a layout of the town of Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1883 from the Library of Congress. They had
The Library of Congress.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? They had an insurance.
It's such a great resource.
The insurance companies would map out the towns and place all the buildings in it with what they were, bank or stables or whatever, and what they were built out of, what their construction materials were, whether it was brick or wood or whatever. So how do you go wrong with that? So
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because that's one of those dilemmas is,
Sure.
Do you make up your town? So it sounds like you do both. So that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
For sure.
Well, and if you could send us the newspapers.com, is that just like a website where they
It's a
have all the
subscription.
newspapers from history?
It's really good.
They have a lot of newspapers from history. It is.
Yeah.
It's newspapers.com. It's a subscription service. If you don't want to subscribe to it yourself, I think it's $80 a year. It's not expensive, but the St. Louis Historical Society or the Missouri Historical Society maintains a subscription. If you go to their facility and just log into their Wi-Fi, you can access it as well.
Wow.
But
That's actually really good information for
And
people to
actually,
go.
I'm going to
Yeah.
make you feel even, here's how cheap I am. St. Charles County Library has a
Yes.
subscription to it. So you can go through your St. Charles County Library system and use it for free.
I think I could speak for all of us to say that we are frugal writers. We will spend the money when it is needed. But if you don't need to pay for it, go to your county library and tell them this might be a huge step for you, but we believe in you. Tell them I am a writer and I am working on a story about blank. What resources I get with my library card? Because I talk to people all the time that aren't even writers, and I'll be like, do you know that you can check out bake pants or all sorts of things? So
telescopes.
like before you
who knew that
tell
the
us
St. Charles County
Right.
Library had telescopes?
exactly. So everyone out there, check
Wow.
your library, because you never know what resources you already have at your fingertips that aren't going to cost you money.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
All right, that's great. Great.
Yeah. So Heather,
Yes.
what burning question do you have for Doug? As a Western lover, I know. What do you want to know?
Well, there are so many things about the Old West or the Wild West. I grew up taking trips to Tombstone. I have seen the Tombstone Rose. I have seen the OK Corral. I have gone there many times, and I've seen Old Tucson. These were I don't know, they're all the things that I have such nostalgic memories of growing up as a child. But at the same time, I think that there are some pretty dark sides to the Old West and to America at that time. And so I guess one of my main questions would be, how do you navigate these darker aspects of the Old West, like colonialism, like the violence? And, I have had submissions of Westerns that were incredibly violent that were not for me, but I know went on to sell. So I'm not saying you have to eliminate all of that. Racial tensions, things like that. How do you navigate that in today's world and still have a successful Western?
It's challenging. It really is. We see things today, 150 years later, 125 years later, however, in what time frame we're talking about, we see it with our sensibilities. And back then, their sensibilities were different, wrong or indifferent. That's when we talk about colonialism, we talk about the westward expansion, the manifest destiny. There were things that were done in the name of progress that were despicable. My take is I don't tap dance around them. I try to just take them on head on without passing judgment, because readers today will pass their own judgment, but without condoning it either. For instance, I wrote a story published just before the pandemic. It was called Trouble in Lonely Valley. And it was about a large rancher who was trying to expand and grow because country was growing. The country needed beef. Not only was this going to make him rich, but he was helping the country to become strong. And he was trying to take over a small rancher. And that's a common theme in Westerns. The guy that I look at as the antagonist, in his own mind, he was doing what was right. Well, the small rancher was also defending what was theirs, what they had built. They had no interest in being this huge conglomerate cattle ranch. They just wanted to live their life and raise their family and keep themselves fed and not have to worry about the world. And that's, to me, that's the conflict, is that they both think they're right. And to me, that translates to today. When you think about it, Walmart moves in, and I don't have nothing against Walmart, but when Walmart moves in, mom and pop shops shut down. So who's right? I don't know. I'm not the arbiter of that. It's just a reality. But my goal is to make people think. And if they can think about it and realize, I didn't make those decisions 150 years ago. I wasn't even alive, but we did make those decisions. And so at the very least, you have to think about it and realize that was done and decide if something needs to change, and look at our own lives and see how we are similar. So that's my take on that, for whatever it's worth.
No, that's good
Thank
to
you.
know. So with that, with in light of what you said, how do you think the genre of Western, like what is the state of it today, do you think, as an author in the genre?
It depends on who you talk to, what answer you're going to get
That's
there.
fair.
I
Like most anything.
That's
Yeah.
right. I went to a writers conference last fall, and the keynote speaker was a senior editor at a prestigious Western magazine. I won't name the title of the magazine, but because there's a few of them out there. But he was very pessimistic about the future of the Western. And I thought, yeah, exactly. And half the audience are Western writers. So it's not great. This is why I'm here.
The truth is important, right? The delivery is also important.
Yeah. I'm glad I plopped down my $1,000 to be here.
Can I say, why did he think, what was his pessimistic view of?
It was interesting. And I don't think I give away who the editor is if by saying this, but was a Western writer for the TV programs. He was a script writer. And so he remembered the good old days in the 50s when if you wrote it, they would come. And to him, the traditional Western, none of the big five publishing companies or any of their subsidiaries are buying Westerns with the exception of Kensington. And Kensington is very selective. They have a very small stable of writers. And the rest of us are left without the opportunity really to sell to, at least as a new writer, to any of those houses. Back in the 50s and 60s, you couldn't walk into a newsstand without seeing 20 pulp magazines that were all Western themed. I love those old stories, but now you are hard pressed to find any of that. And so that was a lot of what he based his premise on. I look at it differently. There are, in the stead of all of these New York City publishers who are no longer looking at Westerns, I see this plethora of small publishing houses, medium-sized publishing houses that are cranking Westerns out like crazy. My own publishing house, I think they have 4 Westerns coming out this fall. Mine is just one of 4. And so other houses, there's another house that is buying up old stories that were written back in the 80s and 90s by a particular author, and they're buying them from him and republishing them under new titles, and they're selling. That particular author, a buddy of mine went to Western Writers of America a couple of years ago, and that particular author is making $200,000 a year reselling those.
Because it's repackaged.
Yeah, just repackaged.
Yep.
So I really do think that there is a future. And if you look, what's one of the most popular shows right now streaming? Yellowstone. Everybody loves Yellowstone. Yeah. It's over with now, but they're coming out with the sequel, and people watch it. It's a Western. It's not an old-fashioned Western. It's not set in the Old West, but it's still a Western. Same with Longmire. Again, not set in the Old West, but it's still a Western. And those are popular. So I really do think and believe in my heart that the Western is not dead. If you put out a good one, people want to read it. They want to watch it, whatever the case may be.
So, Doug, how do you make sure that your Western is one of those that's good and fresh and relevant?
Good question. So to use Yellowstone as an example, what is Yellowstone? Essentially, if you think about it, and I don't know that any of you are old enough to remember Dallas back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
With Larry Hagman. Oh, yeah. It was a nighttime soap opera, just like Dynasty was. Yellowstone isn't that much different. It's really what it is. the difference between Yellowstone and I think what makes it popular today, whereas Dallas you'd never sell today,
Right.
what makes it different and fresher is it's grittier and edgier. It pushes that moral ambiguity. Larry Hagman, let's face it, Larry Hagman, there was no moral ambiguity there. He was amoral, if at best. But when you look at Kevin Costner's character, Senior Dutton, a lot of that is moral ambiguity. He doesn't necessarily want to kill people. He wants to live in peace, but there's that conflict with the reservation. There's the conflict with those who want to turn his land into a ski resort or into an airport or whatever. And so they sometimes have to do things that, because they don't have a legal avenue to resolve the conflict, they do other things that probably cross the line, but in their own mind is no different than what the other guy is doing to them. But it's that edginess, it's that grittiness about it that I think makes it fresher to people. So that to me is where I go. My novels are not bloody and gory, but I do try to make them edgier and a little grittier. My lead characters are tough. They can take a lot of punishment. They're like the Energizer Bunny. They just keep on going because that's what you do. That's the example my dad set, is you just keep on going. You stand up and you keep going and you don't quit. And there's no quit in my characters, just like there's no quit in John Dutton or any of the other characters, Rip, whoever on Yellowstone. And that's how I do it. Others would say other things, but that's me.
I love it.
I think that's great advice. And obviously that is what's appealing to audiences right now too. So spot on.
Sure. Doug, thank you so much for being with us. Can you give our Wayward Writers community any writing tip, or I don't know, just your last piece of gold nugget of advice to people writing or writing Westerns? Say that 3 times fast, everyone.
Writing
Go.
Westerns? Yeah, I can't. Yeah. And so to me, writing a Western is just like anything else, any other story. It's about the people that populate the story. And if you focus on the people, settings are great. Everybody loves the settings. Zane Grey wrote great settings, but like Tolkien, they were about yay long. And readers aren't going to sit through that. So a sentence or two on the setting, leave it at that. And then dig into the characters. What's here in your characters? Who are they? And if you do that, then you can write a good Western.
That's great. We can't wait to read your good Western, Cold Powder Vengeance, coming out later this year. So Thank you so much, Doug, for being with us and sharing your experiences.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.